Welcome to the CV Healthcheck video. My name is Julie Porter and I'm one of the careers advisors at the University of Worcester. This video is a self-reflective tool to help you assess if your CV needs any work before you send it to employers. Before going any further, please ensure that you have a pen and a copy of your CV to hand. Then you can pause the video when you want to make a note or edit your CV as we go through it. When the countdown music begins, please read your CV out loud from your name at your usual reading pace until the music stops. Where did you get to? Halfway down? The first page? It's important to consider employers only spend 20 to 30 seconds on the first scan of your CV, so I stopped you after that time. If I was an employer that you wanted to work for and stopped where you did, would I have read the most relevant information about you to match you to that role or industry? So what's the point? The employer is unlikely to get to page 2 on that first scan, so it's vital that your most relevant information for that job is on the first page of your CV, and ideally the first half, to catch their attention. For example, if you would like a retail job and you have retail experience, then you would probably put that before your education and qualifications. There is no magic CV template. You need to decide which information comes first and create a different CV for each job that you apply for. So we're now going to look at some typical sections you might include in your CV. The first section of a CV normally needs to be your personal details. Is your name in a bigger font and in bold? Have you used just one line for your address and postcode, with your phone and email on a second line? Is the email you have used professional sounding, or shall we say an interesting one that you set up perhaps when you were at school? Please don't blow it at first impression. Have you included details like date of birth, national insurance number, gender, country of birth, or marital status? If so, what do you think that tells an employer about you in relation to how well you could perform the job? Probably not a lot. This information can take up quite a bit of space and could be used to discriminate or for identity theft. So consider removing that irrelevant information and using the gained space to highlight your strengths for the role that you are applying for. After personal details, people often include a personal profile to introduce themselves. Have you done one of these? And if so, does it include any statements such as, I am a hard-working, reliable, conscientious team player? Employers dislike such generic statements, as to be honest, anyone could write them. It doesn't make you stand out, and it doesn't tell them that you're suitable for that particular role. An effective profile will tell an employer 3 things: who you are, what value or strengths you will bring to the role or company, and what role you are looking for. If you think yours might need a bit of work, take some time now to have a go before we move on. Have you included a relevant skills section? This is useful if you are changing career or don't have relevant experience. However, some people prefer to highlight their skills throughout their employment and experience sections rather than a separate skills section. If you have included a skills section, are those skills specifically tailored towards the job you want? If not, employers can be irritated by generic skills that aren't actually necessary for the role they're looking for, and they can lose interest. Additionally, some larger employers use applicant tracking systems to search for relevant skills, so it's really important to get them right for the actual job you want. A person specification is normally provided with a job vacancy that outlines the skills or qualities the employer is looking for, so be guided by that as to which ones to include. And if there isn't a person specification provided, use careers websites such as Prospects or the National Careers Service to browse job profiles and identify the skills that employers commonly look for in that role. Another pet hate of employers is when people provide a shopping list of bullet points of skills with nothing else written next to them. And again, that's meaningless to a skeptical employer without any evidence to back it up. Ensure you provide specific examples from work, study, or extracurricular activities of where you have demonstrated each skill. Have you got relevant experience, whether that's paid or unpaid or volunteering for the job you want? If so, this might be your first section after your personal profile, and it's important to give it a suitable header to make it stand out. For example, if you'd like a marketing role and you have marketing experience, label it marketing experience. That separates it out from your other employment or experience, which you could have in a different section later on, called Other or Additional Experience. Have you put your job title first, followed by the company name? Then the date from and to on the right-hand side of the page. Employers are generally more interested in the role you did rather than who you worked for and full addresses. Have you kept the order and layout consistent for each role? Have you focused on the contribution you made and the impact of your action, along with skills and values to qualify those, rather than providing a simple list of duties? This is really important as an employer scanning it will not take the time to try to work this out. Have you used the phrases had to or we during your employment or experience? If so, consider what impression that gives of you. Had to could imply you were a bit reluctant to do something, and we isn't really appropriate as an employer is assessing your application, not the team that you worked in. Education. Have you started with your most recent qualification? If you haven't mentioned the course you're currently studying, the employer could assume that you're not actually doing anything at the moment. Have you included the course title, university name, and the date to and from? If you are still studying, put the year that you will finish rather than current or present so they don't have to work that out. If your current or most recent course is relevant to the job you want, have you mentioned any modules or projects? Have you mentioned all of your modules? That could be a very long list, particularly if you're in your final year. So instead, perhaps mention up to 3 relevant modules with a summary of the types of projects you have done. And if your final year, you might want to include your independent study title if it's relevant to your role. It's important to ensure that the balance of detail is more on your degree rather than your previous qualifications. So for your previous education, have you summarised your qualifications into one line? Or is it a really long list, including grades? A2s could be on one line and GCSEs on another, as shown in the image. Remember, your CV is your marketing tool. You include what you want to promote yourself to employers. If you're proud about your grades, shout about them. If you're not, you don't have to include them. Do you do anything in your own time that demonstrates passion, commitment, or skills and qualities that employers are looking for in that role? If so, pick a couple and provide a bit of context about what they involve and skills you have developed through them, rather than a meaningless list. What's the one interest never to mention? Socialising. Imagine what image might spring to that skeptical employer's mind. Hungover, late for work, perhaps taking days off sick. No need to mention that. An employer will assume that most people will socialise to some extent. And if you really are busy with your study, your work and other commitments, or genuinely don't have any particular interests, don't worry about this section. Don't include one. It's an optional one. Have you included full contact details for 2 references? I've said your CV is your marketing tool. Could you perhaps use this space more effectively to talk about yourself? It's perfectly acceptable to write references upon request in the UK. This then gives you control. You can pick which person they contact depending on who will best know your suitability for each role, and you can tip them off before they are contacted. Perhaps send them a copy of your CV and the job details. Have you asked permission to use these people as your references? This is really important to do this, and from time to time check that they are still there and still happy to provide a reference to ensure that the employer, when they contact them, gets a positive response. So now that we have looked at typical CV sections, please take a minute to look at this checklist and jot down which areas you are unable to tick and think you might need to now work on. You might also wish to consult our CV Quick Guide for sample CVs, cover letters, and more detailed information. If you are currently studying at University of Worcester or you completed your course with us within the last 3 years, you may also wish to book an appointment with a careers advisor to have your CV reviewed. Here are the links for our resources and booking careers appointments. Thank you for using the CV Health Check resource. I hope you have found it useful in identifying areas of strength and areas to develop. Good luck with your job hunting.